You know it's not very nice to plunder or ransack tombs and disturb the eternal rest of the dead in them, right? But this is all the more true when it comes to the tombs of mythical Egyptian pharaohs, whose rich sarcophagi have attracted looters throughout the ages. The tomb of Tutankhamun was nevertheless able to escape this plundering, thus delivering a fabulous treasure at the time of its quite fortuitous discovery in 1922 by the British archaeologist Howard Carter. Canes and masks in massive gold, beds and thrones in the same metal, as well as statuettes and jewels decorated with precious stones and jewels. In short, an immeasurable treasure. A century has passed since then, but the pyramids have not stopped revealing their secrets. So make yourself comfortable, because today we're going to tell you about the 20 most incredible discoveries of pharaonic Egypt. The solar boat of Cheops. Would you like to go for a little ride on the Nile? Well, you just have to embark with us on the solar boat of Cheops. We offer you a free trip in time and space. This mythical boat of 43.4 meters for a tonnage of 20 tons is indeed the oldest ship in the world to be completely intact. The solar boat of Cheops was in fact a ceremonial ship that was built for Cheops, the second ruler of the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. It was discovered in 1954 in the necropolis of Giza, inside a pit at the foot of the pyramid of Cheops. The servants of the pharaoh had been careful to dismantle it piece by piece and to store them in a logical order so that its reconstitution could be done without error. Because of the ship being part of the objects dear to the pharaoh, it was naturally part of the numerous funerary objects buried with him, and intended to be used by him in the afterlife. Keops will obviously not have the right to a last trip on the Nile, given the unenviable state of his mummy, but you should know that his solar boat has resisted so well to the ravages of time that it is still able to sail if we put it afloat. Sudanese Pyramid. You may think that pyramids can only be found in Egypt, right? But you should know that the Egyptian pharaohs were not the only ones to benefit from these monumental tombs, since in Sudan, the Black Pharaohs also had this privilege. Yes, it's a bit of a mouthful perhaps, but the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs did exist, and it even reigned over Egypt during a whole century. Better known under the name of Kush Empire, the 25th dynasty counted only Black Pharaohs, who were all native of Sudan. The Sudanese pyramids are thus true witnesses of this grandiose era, which continue to reveal extremely important historical parts for the archaeologists and the Egyptologists. Discovery of the burial chamber of Hathor. The most fabulous discoveries in Egypt were for the most part completely fortuitous, like the discovery of the burial chamber of Hathor, a powerful queen of the old Egyptian empire. It is indeed by pure chance that this incredible discovery was made in 1925 on the Giza Plateau, when a photographer working with teams of archaeologists noticed that the tripod of his camera was resting on the upper part of a buried structure. So they began digging through the sand to clear an opening, and the archaeologists ended up inside an almost intact tomb. In front of their exorbitant eyes lay a multitude of treasures and solid gold objects, which had miraculously escaped the intensive looting, and which also proved that this tomb belonged to a personality of very high rank. Archaeologists later determined that this tomb was that of Queen Hathor, an extremely powerful woman, since she was neither more nor less than the mother of the great pharaoh Keops himself. The only drawback is that when opening the sarcophagus of the queen, her mummy was simply not there. The archaeologists put forward a whole bunch of hypotheses as to this intriguing disappearance, but no one really knows where the queen could have been taken, nor why her tomb has never been plundered. A canal tributary of the Nile to transport the stones of the pyramids. Have you ever wondered how the Egyptians could have built their pyramids transporting huge blocks of granite without the help of cranes or trucks? If so, you're not alone, because this question is on the mind of every self-respecting Egyptologist. Many theories have tried to bring a logical answer, such as the wet sand, which would help the stones to slide. And of course, there are other theories a little more far-fetched, involving this time the technological help of little green men or Martians if you prefer. But it could be that the solution is much simpler in truth, because experienced archaeologists have recently discovered that the Egyptians had very probably dug a canal from the Nile in order to be able to move the heavy stone blocks. The canal allowed them to transport the granite blocks from the quarry located more than 6 kilometers away to the place where the pyramids were built. But if this theory is rather credible, it does not explain nevertheless how the Egyptians were able to raise the stones and to lay them out with such a skill and such a harmony that they could so well cross the ages. The enigma of the construction of the pyramids is still not solved, and it is very likely that it will never be. Empty spaces in the Great Pyramid. Put on your Indiana Jones jacket and hat, because we are now going to explore the interior of the largest pyramid in the world. But even though it has been standing there for thousands of years, its secret still lies in its obscure entrails, which no archaeologist has never really been able to explore to the bottom. However, the state of affairs could very well change today, because science and technology have well evolved since Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. While scanning the immense building with their new advanced technology, the archaeologists indeed fell on a cavity of more than 40 meters located just above the Great Gallery. This discovery is of an exceptional magnitude, to say the least, because it could reveal one of the greatest mysteries of Egyptology, namely the location of the body of Pharaoh Cheops. Considered as a living god by the ancient Egyptians, Cheops was a powerful pharaoh who had ruled Egypt around 2600 BC. But although his pyramid has remained untouched by time and decay, the pharaoh himself could never be discovered, as the sarcophagus was empty when it was first discovered. But maybe by scanning in depth the 2.6 million cubic meters of this millenary monument, the secret of Cheops could finally be solved. 2 mysterious wells. We still remain inside the Great Pyramid of Giza for this sequence, because we have not yet finished making discoveries always more surprising and fantastic than the others. The Pyramid of Khufu has many small tunnels, which were mostly used for ventilation, but we have just discovered 2 that were not built for this task. The 2 small shafts, 20 centimeters in diameter, extend from the north and south walls of the Queen's chamber and stop just in front of stone blocks. Thanks to small robots equipped with cameras, the archaeologists were able to discern what looks like a metal handle on these 2 granite blocks, which suggests that they must have been able to open like trapdoors. By pushing their research further, the archaeologists were finally able to pierce these blocks, but they only found another empty chamber, but with hieroglyphs on the walls. These could explain many mysteries if only they could be translated, including the purpose of these enigmatic little tunnels. For the moment, the specialists agreed to say that they were reserved for ventilation, which is all the same a flagrant nonsense, considering that the wells do not open on the outside of the pyramid. However, some archaeologists think rather that they would have had an astronomical function even more mysterious and enigmatic. The southern well is indeed linked to the star Sirius, while the northern well is linked to the star Minoris, Ursa, and Beta. It remains to be seen what kind of astronomical calculations were made, and above all, what was the use for the ancient Egyptians. Discovery of a ramp. Even if today we know that the builders of the pyramids used canals to transport the granite blocks they needed, many gray areas have still not been cleared up. Thus, no one knows how they could even handle these enormous stones, which weighed at least 2.5 tons each, and of which it is estimated that they needed millions of units to build these imposing monuments. How did they manage to pull them, to move them from point A to point B, and especially to raise them on top of each other without the help of cranes or hoists? Well, the answer perhaps lies in this discovery made recently on the site of Hatnub by a group of emeritus archaeologists. It is about a 4,500 years old ramp that the ancient Egyptians used to transport the blocks of stone, thanks to an ingenious system of sledges and pulleys, which allowed them to climb very heavy loads on steep slopes of more than 20%. This discovery for the least capital thus allows the Egyptologists to better determine the techniques of construction of the pyramids and other monumental works of the ancient Egyptians. Discovery of a new pyramid. It is not every day that we make the discovery of a new pyramid, because considering the size of these imposing structures, the least we can say is that they do not really pass unnoticed. However, with the sand of the Egyptian desert and constant movement and the long years of oblivion, nothing is too sure, and it still happens that we make such fabulous discoveries. On this sequence, which takes us to the site of Dashur at some 15 kilometers from the legendary necropolis of Saqqara, you're going to assist to the discovery of an authentic unknown pyramid and that one has never been able to list before. The group of archaeologists who made this incredible find was finally able to access the interior of the pyramid, thus leading directly to the sarcophagus chamber. Unfortunately, and as you can see, the pyramid was completely empty since it was plundered from top to bottom, most probably for ages. The looters had indeed succeeded in penetrating in the pyramid, whereas this one was not yet buried under the sands, and they left strictly nothing to the poor archaeologists. One can thus easily understand the frustration of these last ones, who ardently hoped to be able to find relics and artifacts in this newly discovered tomb. 5 sarcophagi of priests. Discovering a new sarcophagus is a feat in itself, but finding 5 in one go is more of a miracle than anything else. However, it is indeed this discovery that a group of Egyptian archaeologists have just made in the necropolis of Saqqara, a few kilometers south of Cairo. It is indeed while excavating in the site that they fell on tombs which had never been discovered. Inside, they found 5 sarcophagi with their mummies, as well as several small wooden statues and some pieces of pottery. But that's not all, because by translating the hieroglyphs and drawings that were painted on the walls, the archaeologists discovered that one of the tombs belonged to a very high dignitary of the 6th dynasty of ancient Egypt, whose name was Iri. The discovery of these tombs is thus a fabulous event, which will allow the Egyptologists and other historians to be able to better understand the so distant time that of ancient Egypt. Besides, it is not the first time that the necropolis of Saqqara proves to be so generous towards the archaeologists. This giant burial site has been used throughout the history of ancient Egypt, so there may be tens of thousands of tombs that have yet to be discovered. Tuna el Jebel. Let's go now to a sequence that takes us straight to Tuna el Jebel, an archaeological site of Middle Egypt located in the province of Minya, south of Cairo. I prefer to tell you right away it is very hot and the air is dry as an old papyrus, but you will see that it was really worth the detour. Because it is in this necropolis lost in the desert that we made one of the most interesting archaeological discoveries of our modern time. The more than 2,300 years old necropolis indeed sheltered 6 tombs with 40 sarcophagi in perfect state of conservation, and which belonged to priests venerating Thoth. But the discovery did not stop there, because by excavating in the rubble of the necropolis, the archaeologists also found 1,000 archibits, funerary statuettes, which were supposed to help the passage towards the world of the dead. And by studying the mummies of the priests, it was discovered that one of them was considered as the high priest of Thoth, and that he was very probably the leader of all the others buried with him. His name was Djeuti Erdes, and his mummy wore an amulet with hieroglyph signs meaning good year. The mystery of these tombs thus remains complete, because no one can explain that this friendly message from beyond the grave can mean, nor for what reason one finds the whole order of the priests of Thoth with their chief, buried in the same place. Discovery of a family tomb with 40 mummies. And we still remain on the fabulous site of Tuna el Jebel for this sequence, because this place is a real open-air mine for the archaeology lovers. It is indeed here that we made some of the greatest discoveries of these last 20 years, like these 40 mummies which were waiting there for more than 2,000 years to be found. It is in fact a family tomb where were mummified tens of men, women, and children, as well as several domestic animals, mainly dogs. These mummies were therefore all related and were part of a large family of the ancient Egyptian bourgeoisie, which lived and prospered at the time of the reign of Queen Cleopatra. The discovery of such a family burial chamber is rather rare, and the news quickly went around the world, provoking the enthusiasm of scientists and Egyptologists from all sides. These tombs and all that they contain will serve to better know the Ptolemaic period, characterized by the reign of the legendary Queen Cleopatra and her Roman intrigues with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Because it is also the end of pharaonic Egypt that we're talking about, and this family of mummies lived at a turning point in history. Discovery of a tomb of a high official. We go back to the necropolis of Saqqara for this sequence because we have just made an impressive discovery, maybe even one of the biggest of this beginning of century. Most of the time, indeed, we only find in Saqqara tombs of ancient Egyptians who belonged either to the petty bourgeoisie or to the class of peasants and workers. But since this necropolis was also used by pharaohs and nobles, one can also find there, although rarely, tombs of dignitaries or even royal tombs completely intact and preserved. This is the case of this tomb which has just been discovered, and which would belong neither more nor less than to Ptah Mbia, a treasurer and royal scribe under the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. The team of archaeologists who made this formidable discovery was able to study the hieroglyphs inscriptions which were engraved on the walls of the tomb, which revealed to them the identity of the mummy which they had under the eyes, as well as the capital importance of their discovery. They were thus able to determine the functions of this very high dignitary who was in charge of all the treasury of the kingdom, as well as the management of the cattle and the grain silos. This high official thus held an immense power, hardly surpassed by that of the pharaoh and his priests, which certainly earned him many enemies during his lifetime, especially since Ramses II was considered a true megalomaniac thirsty for power. Ptah Mbia could therefore have been assassinated by the henchmen of the pharaoh who did not want anyone to encroach on his territory, or even by a member of the court who wanted to liquidate him to take his place. We may never know unless, of course, we find more historical evidence or invent a time machine. The Tomb of Cleopatra. Queen Cleopatra is so famous that even those who know nothing about ancient Egypt have heard of her. She was literally the world star of her time, representing a politician with a huge influence as well as a romantic and erotic figure who made men kill each other for her beauty. It was her fatal beauty that was to be the cause of her downfall when she killed herself with her Roman lover Mark Antony, using cobras with extremely powerful venom. The two lovers were buried together, but no one knows where, which makes the discovery of their tomb an archaeological event never seen before, which would even exceed that of the tomb of Tutankhamun. As much to say that for the archaeologists and the Egyptologists of the whole world, this discovery would be like finding the Holy Grail. But despite decades of relentless research and study, no one has never been able to find this legendary tomb, and most specialists consider today that it is a lost cause. However, it could well be that one can finally discover the tomb of Queen Cleopatra because after long years of research, an experienced archaeologist may have succeeded in determining its location. The famous Egyptian queen would indeed be buried with her lover in the Temple of Osiris, located in the city of Taposiris Magna, in the north of Egypt. The archaeologist and his team discovered a tunnel dug in the rock at a depth of more than 13 meters under the Mediterranean Sea, and which would probably lead to the royal tomb. Unfortunately, and because of the numerous earthquakes that shook the whole region, this passage was buried under tons and tons of stone rubble, and the access to it was completely blocked. The research continues nevertheless because the sacrifice is worth the effort, and it is not every day that one finds the tomb of the greatest queen who never trod the earth. The lost tomb of Nefertiti. Like Cleopatra, Nefertiti was of breathtaking physical beauty, so much so that she turned men's hearts upside down like ships in a storm. However, this prodigious beauty eventually led to her downfall, and just like her illustrious descendant, she suffered a violent death, probably killed and replaced by a younger and much more beautiful rival. The fate of Nefertiti joins once again that of Cleopatra, because the fallen queen will be buried somewhere without anyone really knowing where her grave is. Archaeologists from all over the world have searched, but they have never been able to discover the location of her tomb. But thanks to a new ground-penetrating radar system at the cutting edge of technology, a team of Egyptologists may soon be able to uncover this mythical tomb. It is indeed while carrying out excavations in the room of Tutankhamun in Luxor that these archaeologists were able to locate secret rooms dissimulated with only a few meters of the tomb of the pharaoh. It is in fact a large corridor 2 meters high and about 10 meters long, and which would very probably lead to another secret room. It is precisely in this hidden room that would rest the mummy of the legendary queen, and there is only to dig in depth to reach her tomb. Discovery of the tomb of a honey producer. This mummy was discovered in 2002 by Egyptian archaeologists while they were excavating in the necropolis of Saqqara 20 kilometers southwest of Cairo. The hieroglyph inscriptions on the walls of the tomb indicate that he would have lived at the time of the New Kingdom between 1567 and 1085 before our era. They also tell us that its owner was in charge of the production of honey at the Temple of Amun, a rather prestigious function which ensured him a very good standard of living at the time. His richly decorated tomb is moreover the irrefutable proof, since the material wealth was also translated in the pomp of the funeral chambers of the dead. The gastronomy of pharaonic Egypt. At present, we still know very little about the gastronomy and the culinary habits of the ancient Egyptians, and this for a good reason. Egyptologists and other greedy archaeologists were indeed much more interested in sarcophagi and solid gold funerary masks than in the remains of food stored in the tombs. However, an Egyptian woman who loves good food and is an archaeologist in her spare time decided to repair this ignominy and thus undertook to recreate recipes that are more than 3,000 years old. Inspired by the hieroglyphs she was able to find on tombs, she prepared delicious dishes which were extremely popular with the ancient Egyptians. Cake with tigers, soups and mandrake infusion or lentil and green onion ragout, all served with cold beer and sweet-smelling bread. So many thousand-year-old recipes that will have pleased the taste buds of the pharaohs and their people. So we just say bon appetit. Discovery of 250 tombs dating from the end of the Old Kingdom. Let's fly now to the province of Sohag in the south of Egypt, since it is in this desert place that a major discovery in archaeology was made. The Egyptologists indeed discovered there some 250 tombs dating from the end of the Old Kingdom, at the end of the Ptolemaic period. The tombs, more than 4,000 years old, were unearthed together with pottery, as well as various objects used for funeral and religious rites. This discovery is crucial insofar as the tombs were in a perfect state of conservation, which is a real miracle when one knows that they have crossed 4 millennia. The tunnel of the Temple of Taposiris Magna. Decidedly, the ancient Egyptians loved to build shafts and hidden tunnels, and whose dark secrets rest with them in their sarcophagi. The latest tunnel to date is that of the Temple of Taposiris Magna, located about 50 kilometers west of Alexandria, on the northern coast of Egypt. Dug into the rock some 13 meters below ground, this 1.3-kilometer-long tunnel is considered a true geometric miracle because of the complexity and efficiency that characterize it. The archaeologists were able to determine the utility of this work of art, which was used thus to lead the water to the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, which counted at the time a little more than 20,000 inhabitants. Discovery of an underwater ancient city in Heraklion. Underwater excavations allow archaeologists to make incredible discoveries, because by being buried underwater, the ruins and relics of the past are preserved from looting and erosion. The discovery of an underwater ancient city in Heraklion has moreover revived the interest of Egyptologists for this kind of excavations. The exploration of this ancient city was thus able to find the debris of a military ship of the Ptolemaic era, as well as the vestiges of a Greek funeral complex dating from the 4th century BC. The notch on the Pyramid of Mancora. You may never have noticed it, but the Pyramid of Mancora presents a large notch on its northern face. This notch is in fact the work of the Caliph Othman ibn Yusuf, son of Saladin, who had undertaken to demolish the pyramid. But as the workmen had spent more than 8 months to finally arrive at this result, the Sultan quickly understood that it would take him hundreds of years to arrive at his end, what pushed him obviously to give up his project for the least pharaonic.